Well, good morning, all. Welcome to the Common Good Podcast. Doug Pagitt here, coming to you on a Monday because it's a very special Monday because we get to talk to Genesis B, poet, author, painter, peace activist, the poet laureate of Vote Common Good. I'll have you all know.
Hey,
Uh,
that's right.
so, very exciting days around here. Hey, Genesis B, good to see you.
Hey, Doug. Thank you for having me and opening up your platform to let me speak about my book. I appreciate you.
Well, you are sure welcome. We're going to be talking here in a minute about people, not things, and this fantastic subtitle. Subtitles sometimes just drive by without anybody even noticing them, but this one pulls in and sits in your driveway. Love poems and paintings for humanity. Just great. So we will be spending some time talking about that because we're not kidding around. Like, you are a poet, you are an author, you are a painter. All that shows up in this book, and you're a peace activist, which I'm sure is what you want to come from this. But let's first
Yeah.
start, as we often do on this podcast. How's the weather where you are? Reminding each other that we might disagree about a lot, but we do live under the same blue sky.
That's right. Yeah, I'm in Atlanta right now. It's been like dipping into the cold now, rainy the last few days, but
Hmm.
today's pretty nice. I went out and walked my puppy with no jacket on, just a sweatshirt, so we're still good.
Living the dream. It's going
Okay.
to be 60 degrees today and tomorrow in Minneapolis, where I live. Can you believe it?
Okay.
I mean, this
Is
is the
that
kind
good
of
or
thing that
bad? I
we
don't have
take.
a point of reference for that.
Oh yeah, no, it could be 30 in
Ooh,
2.5 months. It could be -10. Truly. So I mean, we're just like there are last year I think there was a 110-degree swing difference in the temperature from the coldest day to the warmest day. It was like 100 in the summer, and it was 10 below in the winter.
wow.
110 degrees.
I would
Uh,
say I feel bad for that type of weather for you, but it's a decision that you live there, so
that's right. That's right. Yeah, I made a decision a long time ago, and now I keep living with it. Yeah, it's really,
okay.
really tough. All right. So Genesis B, let's talk about what you're up to. My experiences with you have only been a fraction, and they've all been marvelous. We have traveled the country many a time since 2018 together,
Mm,
and you have been saying the phrase "people, not things" since at least 2018 when I first heard that. Maybe you were saying it before.
yeah,
Talk a bit about that, and because that's not only this name of this particular book and this piece of poetry and art book, but it's a philosophy that that you are into and that you are trying to help people understand and to join you in.
absolutely. The phrase "people, not things" came to me after I did my viral protests against Confederate Heritage Month in Mississippi and was launched into the fight to change the Mississippi state flag. But before all of that, when my protest went viral, I got a lot of backlash. And when I say viral, international, like the New Zealand Times, Billboard, New York Times, everything was posting about my protest because it was very controversial and it was divisive also. I had a lot of backlash and I had a lot of support, but the main thing that happened was it was divisive, and I never wanted to be divisive. Like, I don't regret the protest because the state flag has changed now thanks to my collaborators before me and during, but I wanted to unify. I never wanted to divide people, and so I was, going through a lot after it blew up. I was scared because I was on this national platform. I was like a recluse in my apartment in New York at the time, like drinking a lot. I was just asking the source, like, what do you want me to say? Like, I have this platform. I don't know what to say. And something told me to pick up a paintbrush and paint. And Doug, I've never painted one thing in my life.
Is that right? You
One.
hadn't painted before all that.
Mm-mm. And the first thing I started painting were barriers. And it's become my signature style. You actually see it on the book cover behind me. That's my barrier paintings, and they're
Hmm.
in every single painting. Like these paintings behind me, whether the background, this black is the barriers. Because I didn't know the barriers between myself and the people who were harassing me online. I was like, what is this? Like, they're calling me racist things, homophobic things, misogynistic things. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, the barrier is the internet, first of all. They don't know me, I don't know them. And then the barriers are these preconceived notions that we have
mm,
based in fear,
mhm,
control, lack of communication, lack of self-love. And it wasn't until I started painting those barriers and that phrase kept coming, people, not things. And it's not my phrase, it's our phrase. It's an ancient truth that we are all complex human beings worthy of dignity. First
mm.
principle. It's ancient, right? It's just
Yeah,
a
right,
reminder. So
right.
I've been saying it ever since. I put it on my clothes.
Yeah.
I have a traveling art exhibit called People Not Things. I have a poetry book called People Not Things now. So in a nutshell, it was gifted to me
Hmm.
by forces I don't know what they are. But I'm supposed to say it to the world until I die.
When
And
when
just,
people when people hear that phrase or see it in an art exhibition, which I know you've done around the world and in LA and New York and places where, people see a lot of things.
yeah.
Um, how do people respond when they hear the phrase "people, not things"? What do you pick up from them?
The first thing people think is it is an anti-capitalistic phrase. And
Yeah.
my whole thing is like, if that's what it rings true for you when you hear it, I have no control over the phrase because it's not my phrase. But what I mean by it is a lens through which to look at capitalism. It is a lens through which to look at democracy and any form of government, any form of societal patterns or structures. It's a lens, and that lens says we are all complex human beings worthy of dignity first and foremost. Now, where we go from there, if you truly believe that, you're not going to be exploiting people, right?
Hmm.
You're not
Yeah.
going to be othering people because they're a different religion as you, right? You're not going to dehumanize people in order to capture their resources, right? This is a lens through which to look through humanity. So it's not like anti-capitalistic in nature, like that's
Hmm.
not my purpose.
Hmm.
But if that's what you get from it, then again, I do not control the phrase, if
And,
that makes
and,
sense.
and that's insightful. And I know we've talked about this, having driven, in buses around the country and talked to many different people. The propensity to turn a human being into a thing or an idea or a problem to be solved,
Mhm.
that feels almost universal, right? Like so many societies have done it around the world right now. You see many different ways for people to be organized, but there can be this consistent sense that some people are not considered to be fully people by those that are in power. In fact, I'd
Yeah.
go so far as to say that's just true everywhere that I know of. Um, what do you what? Why do you think that is? I mean, you're a philosopher at heart. You're also, you're a poet. You think deeply about these things. Do you have any sense about what it is about human consciousness that also causes us to like turn people into an inanimate object that you're supposed to treat less than,
It's it's useful. Utility.
hmm, hmm,
If I want to enslave another human, I'm going to need the public's consent to do so. If I want to mass incarcerate Black and brown people, I need your consent as a citizen. In order to manufacture consent, I need to give you a reason why these people are deserving of enslavement,
hmm,
deserving of ethnic cleansing, deserving of imprisonment. It's all utilization. So,
hmm,
in order for us as the public not to give our consent, we need to free our minds. We need to think for ourselves and think critically. When propaganda comes to us, when
hmm,
media comes to us saying, this is why we as a government are doing this, we need to think. So, people, not things, the philosophy calls for an individual accountability
hmm,
to free your mind and break free of those barriers of fear, control, lack of communication, and barrier to self love. If you break down those barriers within yourself and someone comes to you and says, this is why we're going to do this to these people, you're going to say, hold on. No, 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 no. I don't agree with that.
right,
Right? You're
right,
going to be able to take a step back and not join into the echo chamber. You're going to take a step back and do your own research
hmm,
because you are a free minded, autonomous thinking person.
Mm.
So this is what People Not Things is about, is your individual accountability to not just go along with the masses, right? You
Yeah,
still
yeah,
have a mind, and we have
yeah.
access to the internet and so much information and misinformation. And if your soul is not solid and aligned, you're not going to be able to tell what's misinformation and information, because you are just you're grasping at the opportunity to uh, be right,
Mm, mm.
to have your
Yeah,
confirmation bias.
right.
We have to backtrack a little bit because
Yeah,
we're too far gone into this.
yeah. It's an important part of being a human, right? Is to daily and subconsciously even check to make sure you're doing all right. And that can be very positive, right? People do check-ins, they do body scans. I don't know. They find ways to see how they're doing. They look in a mirror, but there can also be that same pressure around confirmation bias, right? Let me make sure my beliefs are still
Mm.
good and right. And we don't even notice the little micro ways that we organize ourselves into making sure everything we are up to is okay, right? Because the first thing I've learned about human beings is most of us think we're doing the right thing. Even if we have to argue with somebody about it, even if we argue with ourselves, we judge, we find a way to rationalize that. We
Yeah,
find a way. So yeah,
for
there's really
sure.
something. Go on. Were you gonna say something?
No, I was just agreeing with you and saying
Oh,
that's real.
yeah. Also this came to mind when you were describing this. I have some friends that work in the military, and now are retired from the military, and they talk about how one of the first things they do in military training in the United States is to make soldiers not think about the enemy as people. Right? And they,
Utilization.
yeah, the
Othering is
language and
useful.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think it's ever done without a purpose of intention when you're
Hmm.
othering
Hmm.
something. And
Hmm.
usually when we grow up othering someone, it's because our society, our community, our family, our churches, our, synagogues or mosques, or, our government
Yeah.
teaches us to other somebody.
Yeah.
Nobody just comes out the womb being like, that human is not as human as I am,
That's right.
right?
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it? We even have a way of doing it. I have another friend who's an educator, and like trains teachers and stuff. And one of the things that she says is when she speaks to people and says, so what do you teach? And the person starts to talk about the subject matter. She says, no, that's not really what I'm asking. And then the person will start to describe the age. Oh, sixth graders. I teach sixth graders. She says, no, that's not really what I'm asking. You teach people. First
Mm.
and foremost, they're not students. They're not, they're human beings. They're people. And there's a way that we just subtly kind of, even as kids, we have a hard time sometimes thinking about our parents as people. It becomes one of the realizations of growing up, right? When you're like, are you kidding me? Now I realize what my mom or dad were experiencing, because they didn't know what they were doing. They were just people. They weren't parents, right? And we kind of have to grow into this thing, and it gets stifled for all kinds of
Right.
reasons. And
I think I think it's natural, right, for us to compartmentalize people because we're different,
hmm,
right?
yeah,
But if you're looking, it depends on which lens you're looking at it. When I go to a different place or culture, hear about a different people, even if they're strange to me, like everything's strange, like I don't understand what's going on here. I look at it as a chance to celebrate our differences,
hmm,
not exploit them, a chance to learn and be curious about what their cultures and beliefs are, not
yeah,
to impose my own or think that mine are the right way, right? I think it all depends on the lens through which you look at the differences
yeah,
and the way that we compartmentalize people.
yeah. Really smart. And Genesis, I know, like you do have that countenance, and I've watched you do it in so many situations, friendly situations, and very aggressively hostile situations that we've been in, where people are yelling at us and so on. And you have done it, in just magnificent ways. And you also don't just approach the world like Hakuna Matata, everybody's doing their thing, don't worry about it, least amount of friction. Like, you are daily moving in the world and making poetry to try to encourage people to see the world in a better way. You're very invitational in wanting to have impact. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like, how do you as a person live in a space of like non-judgment and acceptance and wanting to invite people into a new way of being? Because for some people, they feel like they have to pick one or the other.
Mm.
How do you do it?
There's a quote, I forget who says it. Your viewers will know, or you might know. The sign of an educated mind or an open mind is someone who can entertain an idea without accepting it. You've
Mm.
heard this before?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, been a while though.
Yeah, very famous person said it,
Hmm.
philosopher or scientist. Um, I was raised with I was raised Muslim. Both of my parents converted before I was born. But they would also have us read along with the Quran, the Torah, Judaism, and the gospel, Jesus's teachings. And I think this fortified something in me. There, my parents were like making sure we understand the similarities of all these religions, because the same prophets are in those books,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yep.
Um, but especially Islam, like growing up Muslim was such a beautiful experience because it taught me that balance of like, I am a child of God,
Hmm.
I have immense power to change things around me, but also the humility and humbleness to know that I am a peon in the universe. And
Hmm.
in the big scheme of things, might have to question how impactful that little change is, right?
Yep. Yep.
So that balance of humility and confidence in my ability was something that I learned through Islam. And
Mm.
also Islam is also a very compassionate religion, and it teaches us that any justice anywhere is an injustice to us, and we should stand up for those who are having trouble standing and speak for those who are having trouble speaking. Like, this is what Islam teaches. um, and so I also follow Sufism, which is the mystical form of Islam that's very based in love. Instead of calling
Mhm.
the one God, it's the beloved. And you are my beloved, Doug.
Mhm. Mhm.
The ant is my beloved. Like, all these sentient creatures, like we come from a space of love. So when I see a child being bombarded by bombs, I feel the pain of that child, the pain of his family.
Mhm. Yep.
When I see Doug stub his toe, I'm like, dang, I hope Doug's okay. Yeah, you need some ice,
Yeah.
like compassion. And I don't like to use the word empath because it's overused. Like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm an empath. I'm a human,
Mhm.
and I'm
Mm.
part of a human community.
Nice. Nice.
And I live on the earth and part of this ecosystem. So I have to be cognizant of that too.
Right.
Like,
Right.
just being self-aware that, we have immense power. What we say can destroy worlds, or it can create them.
Mhm. It, no matter what background you're tapping into, the kind of Islam that you were raised in, you're touching in Christianity and the Gospels and in teachings of Judaism. Being a queer Black woman doesn't always sit well in those situations. There's not a one that's like, oh, you know what we're fundamentally about and always have been. Um,
Yeah.
Queerness, blackness, and femininity. That's just right. They're not about that. So you've also had to navigate that, and you've navigated a complex world and your own self-understanding of what all that means. Having a mom who presents white and a dad who presents, our culture, Black or African, and mix of religions and your own queerness as a that you see and I do as an attribute, not as a negative to overcome. So all of that feels like it's part of this for you when you talk about people, not things. Like, there's a complexity for some people when they hear people, not things, or notions like that. It's like, let's just boil everything down to its simplicity. You
Mm,
feel like you're like, "Oh, no, let's make sure we understand the absolute complexity of all this, and that's a better way to understand what it means to be human, that it's a more complex way than a
yeah.
thing. A thing is simple. People are complicated." Is there anything in there? Do you wanna talk about the experience of queer Black woman life and how that's impacted you?
Sure. I think the first principle of people, not things philosophy is that we are all complex human beings worthy of dignity. And that is a very important part of it, right? Of we as a human race need to expand. And we
Mm,
have been expanding. We've had so much innovation in technology and industry. We've gone through several types of revolutions because we are expanding. The reason for that expansion can be, of course, argued, but I think it's time for us to expand on the human part of it, not just the industrial and like the capitalism part and the money part, but because we are behind, we're like ahead in the
mm,
technological revolution and almost like we're declining in our humanity evolution.
wow,
We need to you know we don't even teach media literacy in our schools. Like that should
yeah,
be the primary thing our kids are learning, as we have are inundated with all types of media and social media. We don't even have a frame. Like Noam Chomsky says, access to information means nothing without a framework of understanding. We haven't developed a framework. So when I say we aren't seeing the complexities and we're narrowing each other into boxes, this is a symptom that we are operating from a very low vibration and a low threshold of the human mind. And we are more capable of this. We are capable
yeah,
of much more.
yeah,
And I'm calling on my fellow humans to raise your vibration, raise your critical thinking, and all of these things. Like, don't just be force fed what to think about people. Like, take your time and think.
yeah. Uh, well, you have certainly done that, and, we've had a nice little dive into philosophy class here, which I've adored. Uh, you also needed to put that into poems and into paintings, right? Like, it can't just stay or you choose to not just leave it in these spaces. So,
Right.
let's talk about the book for a bit.
Sure.
Before we started the live stream here, you were saying that there's 4 particular barriers that you've noticed, and you've structured the book around that. Um,
Yeah.
and I just want to comment that I have watched you try to figure out where the barrier, like, you want to see the barriers in order to work around them. Some people are just more concerned about the barriers, whatever they are, and that's fine. I just know of you that your concern about understanding the barrier is to do something else in response to the barrier than the typical response to it.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about that in the structure of the book, and maybe even say a little bit about who lets you as a publisher create a book that's part poetry and part art book? Like, nobody does this, right? I'm sure this was a tough
Andrews
pitch.
McNeil,
Yeah.
Andrews McNeil Publishing, shout out to them. And shout out to our Vote Common Good brother, Tim Gilman, who actually helped me compile the first transcript before I even sent it out to
Right on.
try to get my book deal. He helped me do that. So shout out to Tim
Oh,
Gilman,
right on, right
Vote
on.
Common Good family. I came to him with this idea. He said, I'll help you, and,
Yeah.
and it resulted in a deal with Andrews McMill Publishing, and they've been just great, just great. So
And by the way, the book comes out tomorrow for people
yeah,
who are looking for books. Books are released on Tuesdays. It's our little public service announcement every time we have an author on about a book. Fridays are when movies come out. Um, random days of the week are when Vote Common Good podcasts come out, but books are released on Tuesdays. That's just how it goes. It's how they keep track of sales numbers. So you can start ordering it now. People, not things. All right, but let's talk a bit about what's in it and how you've structured it and why it's poetry and art, or poetry and painting.
I'm just an artist. I've been an artist since I was a child. I haven't started. I only started painting in 2016 after the protest, but I started poetry as soon as I could write. My parents taught us how to write and read really young. And and I've been writing poetry ever since and converting those poems into rap songs. And most people throughout my career know me as a rapper, because I've converted my poetry into, you know, hard hitting beats that say something. Um, the barriers are barrier of fear, barrier of control, barrier to communication, barrier to self love.
Hmm.
All right. And I think, speaking of control, a lot of times when we have these philosophies that we develop, even though I'm just pulling from all these different philosophies that I've learned throughout my life, whether it's Stoicism, Taoism, learnings of Bonhoeffer, like they're all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Um, we try to impose them on people, right?
Mhm.
No, that's not what it's about for me. These are my own personal barriers that I had to overcome so that I can
Mm.
go to my friend Lewis, who's a neo Confederate, and say, hey, let's sit down and have a conversation about the state flag. Let's humanize this issue. You and I sit face to face. I'm curious why you think the way you think. What were you taught? Because we're all just the sums of our ideologies, right? So I had to break down these barriers within myself
Mm.
in order to do that, Doug. I had to transform myself. I have a set of practices, affirmations, journal entries, and meditations that I do to break down these barriers for myself every day
Mm.
so that I step into the world an open human. And
And I just want to punctuate this piece of it, just be because when you talk about being friends with Lewis, who you developed a relationship with, this was somebody in Mississippi advocating for keeping and extending the Mississippi state flag that had Confederate symbol as the flag, and people who are calling for ideologies that would harm you and people like you and many others. So when you are saying you're going to approach someone with dignity, with an understanding to try to that is that is your response to danger. And again, I won't tell all the stories, but I have watched you in front of Proud Boys and other people whose goals are to do harm in this country, for you to say, "Look, I recognize the harm that could come here, and I'm going to engage with this philosophy of mutuality, human dignity, and respect." Y- Some people, and I only bring this up because some people think like, "Hey, we can use dignity and human engagement, but not when there's risk on the line. People's lives are in danger. Then we need to use something else. We're going to pull the sword. We're not going to pull for understanding and dignity." Can you just say a little bit about that? Because I think that I just want I think there's a benefit you give to people, and I really want people to be able to access a little portion of that about how serious these issues are for you.
mm,
Um, like you've had your life threatened multiple times, and you
sure.
still choose this approach.
Um, I have no fear of any human because I know who I am. I know where I come from. My grandfather, Reverend Clyde Briggs, gave his life, dedicated his life, risked his life to the empowerment of his community in Mississippi to help them get the right to vote in the 60s, to help them have the right to walk with their head high as humans and not as third class citizens, which was the case. So I know where I come from. My father and my mother made sure we knew our background. When you know where you come from, you do walk with the strength, knowing that that's in your spirit, in your DNA. Also, in Islam, it teaches us that an injustice anywhere is an injustice to us, and sometimes it takes putting yourself in danger in order to stand up for people. And I was
Mhm.
standing up for my community in Mississippi when I said, let's have these conversations because these other ways aren't working. So let's get down to the common good, the common
Yeah.
interest that we both have, and see if we could build upon that. Like, okay,
Mhm.
do you want, healthcare for your elders? Do you want, Mississippi's the poorest state. I'm poor, he's poor, you're poor, we're all poor. Okay, so is that a common interest we can build upon so that we can try to rise up economically together, right? That's what
Yeah.
Martin Luther King started preaching on before he was killed, right?
Right.
So I just don't have any fear of death. I'm willing to die for my convictions. I've been like this since I was a child. I always felt this. I don't know if I was dad brainwashed me or whatever, but I just feel I've seen children dying. I had to watch about the Holocaust and World War II as a child so that my parents could teach us that these are what humans are capable of doing to each other. This is what the evil that humans are
Mm,
capable of. And I said, well, who's going to go save those kids? I was a kid being like, I wish I could go save those kids. And this happened in the
mhm,
1940s.
mhm.
So this is the so now when I'm big, I'm an adult and I have some agency. And if I see it happening, I'm gonna speak out against it. I'm gonna fight for it,
Yeah,
fight against oppression when I see it. But ultimately, I'm willing to die for my convictions. I'm not willing to kill for them though. You get what I mean?
I
Like
do.
that there's a line in the sand for me when it comes to death in life. You know, I've done a lot in my young life. I could die tomorrow and be like, dang, I did that. Seriously.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
me talking
You've
to Lewis, or me going up to the Proud Boys or whatnot, like, that yeah, that'll say more about them and their cause if they harm me,
yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah, and also say you're not foolish or anything. Like you're not intentionally, you're not a risk taker for just risk taking purposes. Like you are willing to cross the boundary of fear. So fear is one of the boundaries. What was the next one? Control. Is that right?
Control. Yeah, and this is not just in the social justice sense, this is in our relationship sense, you
Hmm.
know? We're in a society where, like, we're taught control, whether a man needs to control a woman or a woman needs to control her man or, non-hetero tropes. It's like, nah, that's how you push people away. The more you try to control, it's an energy thing. People pull away, and knowing
Yeah.
that I don't own any human being. I don't own my girlfriend.
Right.
She could do what she wants, say what she wants. She's not an extension of me. Like, we are two autonomous people. Like, when I talk about control, like the need to when we talk about social justice or government or society, like the need to control a certain narrative of what the people are seeing is very big in most societies, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
We need to be able to manufacture consent from the public in order to push certain policies through, get certain politicians elected.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're not as free as we think in this society. I feel very privileged to be an American and be born in America. Trust me,
Sure.
I more and more I think about that privilege
Yeah.
but we're not all the way free.
Yeah.
The
You
illusion of freedom is far more dangerous than jail cells and cramped cages, and we have an illusion of freedom here.
if people are watching the video and they saw me smile when you started that, that's one of the lines from one of the epic poems, spoken word pieces that Genesis B has done many times in front of many, many people. And it's near on perfect in the sense that every word and phrase carries great meaning. That's available on the internet. Uh, Mississippi is a microcosm poem. It's more than a poem. I don't know. It's a piece. It's a how do you refer to it? Do you call it a poem? By the way, I mean
Yeah.
it's 4 minutes long or something. I mean it's just more than a.
Speech.
It's yeah. It's a combination of things. It's really quite incredible, and very
Yeah.
true. Earlier there was a little passing comment, and I stepped on it a bit, so I want to come back to it. You had said something about development of the soul to be able to do this work, and I just wanted to give you another chance to maybe talk about that around this issue of control, the barrier of control. Like what development do you work on and do you think is beneficial for others to work on as they're trying to overcome barriers of control? Um, because that
Yeah.
there's a lot of that. Like we just want people to behave and do certain things, and some of that can be really helpful. There's times where you really do want someone's help and instruction on what you do or where you go or how you develop a skill can be very positive. To live inside of a system that has boundaries to it and limits and opportunities and all that can work out great. Um, and not always. So,
Yeah.
how do you develop a soul nature for you
Yeah.
that overcomes that?
So I have this document that's for free download, and I'll give you the link to put in the comments. It's called The Philosophy. and practice of people, not things. It's free.
Hmm.
It's not this book. This is the poetry. Read the poetry first. It'll give you a framework of understanding for the philosophy. But in this document, there are practices such as affirmations, journal entries, journal questions around control, fear, communication, self love, and meditations
Hmm.
that I've practiced in order to break down these barriers within myself so that I can show up in a specific way in the world, right?
Hmm.
So I can share that with you, and
Great.
you could share with your
Beautiful.
audience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, we'll do it. Okay, so there was barrier of fear, barrier of control, and then the barrier to communication, and then was it barrier to self love? Was that the
Self-love.
okay?
Yeah.
Talk about this barrier to communication. What are you getting at there?
The internet. The not being able to speak and have discourse. I don't think that's
Yeah.
something that we're really taught in school. So, however our family unit discusses things, that's how we go out into the world to
Wow.
discuss things. So, you've been in relationships before, new relationships, and you all have a lack of communication. Like they're hearing something or that you're not quite saying, or they're interpreting something, or vice versa. I think that we as a society in America, we do a lot of our discourse online and not a lot of discourse in person with people. Like that's uncomfortable for us to
Yeah.
actually sit down with our family members and like, hey, I saw you posted this. Like, where are you coming from with that? Like, I'm
Yeah.
curious. We don't know how to approach things that we disagree with childlike curiosity. We don't know
Hmm.
how to do that. We
Yep.
get defensive, we get triggered, we get traumatized. And I'm not saying that's wrong. It's just an observation that I've seen because sometimes when you come at it from that angle, there's a barrier
Mm.
that we can both be talking, but it's bouncing off of this barrier. It's not getting
Yeah.
through to our hearts and our minds. So there are certain practices that I do to learn how to actually listen to people and not always just be imposing
Mm.
my ideas, my
Mm.
philosophy. Like, well, what's your philosophy? Your
Yeah.
philosophy, every philosophy that I hear, thoughts that I hear as an artist, I'm constantly absorbing
Mm.
thoughts and ideas, entertaining thoughts without accepting them,
Yeah. Yeah.
entertaining, and it's a beautiful way to live. And I just want to share this with people because life is brighter this way, love is deeper this way, family connections are bonded better this way, like we
Mm.
don't have to be a hard, you're dumb because you think this way, or you're brainwashed, and it's
Yeah.
just a lot. So there's a barrier to communication, I think, in our society. But I had to break that down for myself and learn how to speak and disagree with people also. I wasn't, you know, raised like that.
Hmm. Well, one of the big projects that we're endeavoring in here at Vote Common Good is not only to understand how we engage with each other, but recognizing that so much of how we engage with one another is really how we're engaging with our own self.
Mm,
That there
the
are,
self-love part.
yeah, there are things where the stuff we will say to ourselves or think about ourselves or condemn ourselves for having a thought or an idea or an inability is something that, I mean, almost no matter how harsh a person is externally, they wouldn't be that harsh with others as we are with ourselves, right?
It's
There's a
real.
and that internal struggle is I just am increasingly convinced it's the root of so much of our external struggles. There's just there's a
Does.
lack of self. Do you want to say much about that?
You hit it right on the head. In the philosophy, the downloadable philosophy I'll share with you, it says barrier to self-love is the most important
Mm.
because without breaking down how you feel about yourself, how you speak to yourself, your inner dialogue, how you truly feel about yourself based on what society, family, church has taught you to think about yourself, if you can't separate from that, those other three barriers are going to be hard within you,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So you hit it right on the head
Hmm.
of like how we speak to ourselves in our inner dialogue. And you'll see in the journal questions and the affirmations, a lot of it has to do with questioning your own thoughts towards yourself,
Mm.
right? Because if
Yeah.
you can come to a place, and I don't mean self-love in the woo-woo, like you said, blah, fluffy way. I mean, truly, can you forgive yourself? Can
Yeah.
you walk through embarrassing moments that you've done in your life and give yourself grace and be like, dang, that was cringy, but I was young. I'm better now. I've learned from
Hmm.
that. You know, can you really take the time and break down that, or do you just suppress the resentment that you have for yourself, or relive certain traumas and say, well, that was my fault? Like, this is
Yeah.
really deep stuff, deep work that we have to really do. And if we want to show up, because that radiates out into the
Mm.
world, right? How you speak to yourself will radiate to your children, will radiate to your community. But if you come from a place of self-love and grace and forgiveness and understanding and compassion for yourself, that too radiates. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. There's a great line in a song that I know that goes, "Don't confront me with my failures. I have not forgotten them." And it's
Mm.
just a great little notion, right? Like, oh, you can tell me I'm a anything you want, and I'm just gonna say, You're late to the party. I'm already there," right? Like, and if we don't, if we somehow believe that our role in another person's life is to really help them see themselves, like, if it's in a confrontational way or a, you know, you're a problem way, most people are way ahead of us in that confrontation. What a lot of us have trouble seeing is the beauty and the goodness and the glory that we see in others, in ourselves. I mean, that's the deepest. That's one of the deep struggles. And I think that's something that kind of comes with age. Yeah, I don't know. Like over
Mm.
time, I think we just begin to realize all that. Yeah,
We are walking miracles. We're searching
no doubt.
for a God. There's God in you. You are God. And I
Mm,
don't mean that in a blasphemous way for all of our people of faith. I don't mean that you are a God. We are of we are of the universe. We are a
hmm.
miracle walking. The fact that we're alive and I'm sitting here talking to you
Yeah,
today
come on.
is a miracle that I am grateful for beyond belief. And
Yeah,
we have to live our life like that. Our life is short. If you go your whole life in a fog and not understanding this precious gift of being able to even suffer in this life, like, you're missing out. Like, it's not too late. Like, start now.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, Genesis B, I'm glad that you've taken some of your precious moments, not only to talk with us and to do anything with Vocom Good. We always love that.
Yeah.
But also that you would take the time to make this poetry and make poetry available. I mean, look, I'm an author. I've written lots of books and stuff. And there's one thing, the kinds of books I write, which are kind of nonfiction books about things. They're great. And people should buy all of them. Go to Amazon and please just buy all 10. You can get them at a 10 pack. Uh, they're great. Poetry for a lot of people is on another level of vulnerability, though. Poetry is not something that a lot of people treat the way they do nonfiction as an author.
It's
Like
true.
s- yeah. You want to talk about that at all? About
I
the
didn't realize
process?
that until I wrote this book and was, like, asking people who I'm kinda writing about different experience, family or lovers, like, asking them, "Is it okay if I include this very vulnerable thing?" And they're like, "Nah." Even though it's not directly about them, right? It's,
Yeah.
like, poetry and art is strange. I think a lot of people don't quite understand about
Hmm.
thank you, Alex, about this isn't literal, but it's birthed out of
Yeah.
experience. And then we take those experience like a little dust and we
Hmm.
build upon it. We build worlds upon it. We build imagination. We build
Mm.
opportunity. We build possibility off of just one human interaction. This is how an artist's brain works.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
if there's a whole poem in there where I am a homeless man
Mm.
speaking from a homeless person, a man specifically, not a homeless woman, not a woman with a home, right?
Hmm.
It's like art is it's so powerful, and I think people can't draw the literalness out of it. Like, so I had some people who were like, "Yeah, I don't want you to include that." Even what I'm saying is such a bigger commentary on humanity than our interaction, right? So I thought that was really interesting. I didn't
Hmm.
This is my first time publishing like a poetry books or my paintings like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
It's very intimate. Be, Partly because poetry wants to take the least, wants to just use a different form than your typical sentence structure that we all know how to deal with, right? There's a thing to the structure of poetry that is causing the reader or the hearer to do more work than you
Mm,
typically do w- when you're reading standard sentences, right? For the most part, like it's just calling on the reader to participate more. Like it's harder to be a bystander to poetry and music than it is to other things, right? You can sort of
true.
read words and be like, oh, I agree or I disagree. Poetry
Yeah.
tends to implicate. It's like, what's this?
Yeah.
Hey, what's that got to do with you? Like it's all of a sudden it's all up in your business, you know. And but it also means that the poet is seen differently, you know. Like there's a reason that, like, I don't know, on this little moniker down here about, you know, the stuff you do, which is not you, so I want to be careful on that. There's a difference between poet and author, right? Like I would never say I'm a published poet. I'd say I'm a published author. It's technically true, and just actually true. But I'm not a poet, right? And so we make some distinction in our world about poets and authors. Um,
Mm,
and I think it's helpful. And I'm not just trying to be binary about it, but I think it's
yeah.
actually there's a different thing there. Do you now do you feel like a poet in a different way now that you're holding a piece of poetry, a poetry book of your own in your
Yeah.
hand?
No, I've always been a poet since I was five years old.
Uh huh.
I've been writing poetry, sharing it with my family and my classmates. I think the first poem I ever shared was I was in the third grade. I still remember the poem. It goes, to die down low in state of mind, the power of seeing, not being blind. May teacher teach you, may you learn. If you teach them, is it your teacher's concern? Go stray of the path, you will feel the wrath. While I am a sinner, lay tip on my lips. It's too late, we're in state of apocalypse. That was like the first poem I ever wrote as a
Like
little kid,
as an 8-year-old,
maybe 7.
seven, as a 7-year-old.
Yeah, my
That's
teacher thought I
unbelievable.
plagiarized it. So I've always been a poet and
Unbelievable.
always trying to make sense of the world in my own way. You know, I only became a strong speaker. I was very shy as a child. I didn't really speak much, you know. I just followed my brothers around. In school, I didn't speak a lot. I learned how to speak through poetry and music
Mm,
and performing and learn how to articulate myself eloquently and became obsessed with words at a very young age, semantics, words, the relation to words and emotion, right? I could finally express myself, what I was going on in my little
mm,
mind. I couldn't talk about these things, apocalypse and government and what I'm seeing with little children suffering. I couldn't speak to my peers about that as a 7-year-old. I had to put it in poetry form. So I had to learn the person you see now who uses my words so carefully and confidently and purposefully is because I started as a baby poet.
mm. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Totally. I mean, that's what I'm getting at with poets. Like they just do different things with words. I know there's a lot of styles of poetry, so there's some that are, you know, flow of subconsciousness. I get that, but
Yeah.
for the most part, it's really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thanks. So I just want to remind people the book is called "People Not Things: Love Poems and Paintings for Humanity." And is officially out tomorrow. I bet if you ordered it on the places where you order books, or if you go to the kind of places that carry poetry books, or if you live near a bookstore, if you still somehow can be in a time portal to go to a place where you could walk into a store where they sell books, uh, ask them to order "People Not Things" for you.
Thank
It
you.
really helps, by the way. A lot of people don't know how, you know, things work. Like I don't understand how cheese is made. I've seen videos, but still blows my mind. Um, so I don't understand most things in the world. And if you don't understand how books end up in places versus not being in places, buyers have to make a decision, and bookstore buyers have to make decisions. So if you go into a bookstore and say to them, "Hey, this is a book I'm looking for. Would you consider ordering it for me?" That puts the book in that bookseller's mind, and they might order 3 copies and leave them on a table, and they get them out. So if this book is meaningful for you and you like bookstores, or you live near one, even if you're gonna, I don't know, even if you're gonna order it online or whatever, just stop by a bookstore and ask them to, if they have it, or if they'd bring one in for you. It's just a
Yes,
good thing. It
I
helps
appreciate that. Thanks.
spread the word.
Yes,
What
thank you so much again, Doug. Like, when I reached out to you about the book, it was just right away. You were like, "Yeah, let's talk about it." So I appreciate your enthusiasm and always wanting to support me.
Of course, of course. Any other ways that people can follow you? Anything that you'd tell them to do or
Um,
look for, or is there a best way for you, for people like around here? We say follow us on YouTube if you're not already doing our YouTube stuff. If you're on
I
Facebook or
see.
somewhere else. Do
So
you have a favorite spot?
On Instagram, I'm at Genesis B, all one word, and peoplenotthings.com. Yeah, come to peoplenotthings.com. You know, you can purchase my paintings, originals or prints. You can purchase clothing, People Not Things. You can just purchase the book.
Hmm.
Yeah, peoplenotthings.com.
Soon, dietary supplements. You can pick up some dietary supplements.
We needed those for the road. Listen, y'all,
Yeah.
being on tour there's nothing to eat. You go to Flying J hot dogs. Is We had a vegan on the bus. I felt so bad for him.
Yeah, we really should put together like a whole order it online for when you're going to travel the country and try to save democracy kit. Which Genesis B, we're planning to do again, of course, in 2024. So we'll see you on the road, my friend. We will be together, hopefully, in many places. All right. Hey, thanks for all. By the way, I don't know if you've seen people in the chat, but Alex has been saying many things here. Peggy is a pretty consistent
Mm.
commenter here. Kimberly
Hey,
has been with
Kimberly.
us. Dodie is with us.
Hey, Dodie. Thank y'all
Uh,
for tuning in.
Bunch of others just right here in the live stream, and then others that are watching all this in the future that they get to live in. That we
Beautiful.
will all maybe make it to. All right. Hey, love you, friend. Thanks for all this goodness.
I love you, and I love everybody watching and everyone who will watch. Love yourself.